We will talk about bloating. Bloating is a very common symptom, and it happens usually because of gas in the intestines. The most common cause of bloating is gas in the intestine, and people describe it as an uncomfortable fullness of stomach. Stomach feels swollen or hard, and maybe the stomach can be physically swollen. We will discuss what are the 5 most common causes of bloating. First and most important, which is responsible on 40% of cases, is eating habits. Eating quickly or overeating causes bloating. Why? Because when you eat quickly, you accidentally swallow air, and this air causes bloating. It's important cause. Another is when you're eating a lot or overeating. When you overeat, you eat together, for example, starch and dietary fibers and fats, and this combination causes slowing down of gastric emptying, and you feel fullness for prolonged period of time because fats stays in the gastric sometimes for 6 hours, so it causes sense of fullness. That's why eating habits is very important in case of bloating. So overeating is important, and eating quickly is important cause of bloating. First two, they are eating habits. Second most common cause is food intolerance. What means food intolerance? It means that when our body is unable to digest specific food, which should be digested in normal cases. For example, if person eats apple or other fruits and can't digest it fully and adequately, it can cause bloating. Because they are digested and they are broke down in large intestines by bacteria, and in this case, byproduct is gas formation. So food intolerance affects more than 20% of general population, and food intolerance causes bloating in many cases. For example, the most common food intolerance is lactose intolerance. It affects almost 65% of general population at some degree, of course. For some people it's very mild and they have no symptoms. For some people it's severe and they can't tolerate even smaller portion of milk. But most people have lactose intolerance, and they have some symptoms when drinking milk or when they eating dairy products. So very common and classical example of food intolerance is lactose intolerance, when person cannot digest lactose, which is milk sugar, and it affects more than 65% of world population. It's highly dependent on location. For example, in Northern Europe it affects only 5%, and in Latin America it affects more than 70%. So it's highly dependent on geographical locations. Also, another classical example of food intolerance is fruits. Fruits contain fructooligosaccharides. They are oligosaccharides. They are a form of fructose, fruit sugar, and body can't digest and absorb it fully, and it is digested by bacteria, and person have symptoms such as gas formation and abdominal discomfort and pain and sense of fullness. So fruits and lactose are two most common classical examples. Third most common cause of bloating is irritable bowel syndrome. Irritable bowel syndrome affects around 15% of population. So it's also very common disease. And what means irritable bowel syndrome? In such cases, person's intestines is very sensitive, and even normal level of gas or normal level of food in the intestine causes increased sensitivity of fullness, increased sensitivity of motility, of motion, of bloating, and it is called visceral sensitivity. So people with IBS or irritable bowel syndrome have increased sense of sensitivity, increased sensitivity, and it is called visceral sensitivity. Also, they have classical symptoms. It's alternating diarrhea and constipation. So patient can have primary diarrhea or primary constipation, but many patients they have alternating of these two, diarrhea and constipation, and symptoms are relieved after defecation, after release stool. Symptoms are relieved also. That's irritable bowel syndrome, and irritable bowel syndrome is triggered by several types of foods, main type of foods, which is called FODMAPs, FODMAP foods. They contain oligosaccharides, for example, wheats, onions, apples. They contain specific oligosaccharides, and these oligosaccharides can trigger irritable bowel syndrome. So people with irritable bowel syndrome should avoid such products like wheat, onions, garlic, apple, alcohol, caffeine, because they have very sensitive digestive tract. And constipation. Constipation is another common cause of bloating. Constipation also affects reasonable amount of people, around 15%, and it causes abdominal swelling, discomfort, and people have sense of bloating and fullness. And very important part and last one is eating quickly and overeating. We should mention it again because quick eating and overeating are responsible on majority of cases. That's why we should pay attention to them. They are responsible on majority of cases. And treatment. What is treatment? It's slowly and smaller portions to minimize air swallowing. Avoid foods like beans, lentils, dairy products, carbonated drinks, because they can cause gas formation in the intestine. Identify and avoid food that cause bloating. And if person has irritable bowel syndrome, they should follow FODMAP diet, which means avoid food which contains these oligosaccharides such as apple and wheat and onions and garlic and many other foods actually. And constipation. In case of constipation, dietary fiber is effective. Stay hydrated and use mild laxatives if needed. That's the treatment. That is symptoms, causes, and treatment of bloating. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your watching. If you like my videos, please thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye for now.